Hi, my name is Bethany, and today I want to talk to you about echolalia. First off, I believe it's pronounced echolalia, but I like echolalia better. But for the sake of this video and sounding like I know what I'm talking about a little more than normal, I will go with echolalia. Try to, at least. Echolalia is very basically repeated or echoed sounds or words. In fact, this is something that every single child learning how to speak does. We learn languages through echolalia. When a parent might say to their little kid if they want a bath, that child might try to say the word bath instead of yes in response. Parents try to get them to repeat back what they said, like say dada, say mama, and try to get them to repeat. So that's echolalia. So why mention something like echolalia on a channel about autism? Well, that's because a lot of people on the spectrum have echolalia, and most of them aren't little kids. So most children actually phase out of using echolalia. They start to use their own thoughts to communicate and put together their own words, etc. in using language. However, some people don't actually phase out of this. These tend to be autistic children who repeat things back in an effort to communicate, or even just because, and we're about to go over that. So the interesting thing about echolalia is that it comes in different forms. I actually experienced different forms of echolalia myself. So the first is interactive echolalia. This is a form of echolalia, how many times can I say this word, that is used to interact or to communicate. Heartline breaks it down like this. Turn taking. The person with echolalia uses phrase to fill an alternating verbal exchange. Verbal completion. Speech is used to complete familiar verbal routines initiated by others. So basically they're going to be anticipating your response. So for example, if you say, "What does the dog say?" and they say, "Woof woof, good job." They're saying the good job because they're used to hearing you say good job after they say woof woof. Providing information. Speech may be used to offer new information, but it may be hard to connect the dots. So they use an example of a parent asking a child what they want for lunch, and the child starts singing a theme song or whatever it's called, the jingle or whatever from a commercial about a lunch meat that they're selling on TV or whatever. So for them, that's communicating that they want a ham and cheese sandwich or something to that effect, but that can be kind of random in the parent's eyes until they connect the dots. And then there's requests, which a person may use echoed speech to make a request. For example, that would be like saying, "Do you want lunch?" when they're asking for lunch, because they're used to you saying, "Do you want lunch?" and they're being lunch. So they figured they say, "Do you want lunch?" and they'll get lunch. Then there is non-interactive echolalia. So this is not meant as a means of communication, but only for oneself. There is non-focused speech. Person with echolalia says something that has no relevance to the situation, such as reciting parts of a TV show. Now this kind of echolalia is considered to be self-stimulatory. Then there is situation association. Speech is triggered by a situation, visual, person, or activity, but is not a way of communicating. For example, you could see a name brand product on the shelf at a store and start singing the jingle to it because you have made that association and it's just happening. Then there's rehearsal, which the speaker utters the same phrase softly to themselves a few times before responding in a normal voice. This could be a practice for an upcoming interaction. So I think a lot of people actually do this. It's, again, like rehearsing what they're gonna say and do before they do it. I don't think that is like super exclusive, so I think a lot of people actually do that. I think. I don't know. Am I the only person who thinks that? Then there is self-direction, which people might use utterances to walk them through a process. For example, if you're going through the process of washing your hands, you might be saying, "Turn on the water, rinse your hands, use soap, scrub, scrub, scrub," you know, whatever. Those sorts of things to walk through the steps until they are done with the process of, say, washing their hands. In addition, echolalia is either immediate or delayed. So basically, immediate echolalia would be something like a parent saying, "Do you want a bath?" and the child saying bath in response immediately. Then there is delayed, in which a person repeats the words or sound or whatnot not immediately. So this could be in interactive or non-interactive echolalia. So I actually primarily have non-interactive echolalia. I've actually thrown people off a few times. The whole situation association echolalia, suddenly saying things to do with something that I saw and repeating back kind of the song or the words to do with that. but I've also found myself repeating words to myself over and over and over and over. And that's where it's coming to maybe a self-stimulatory kind of process. And I've actually done some of the self-direction through certain processes, and that's usually, especially if I'm lacking focus, it's almost kind of like using the process that's very rudimentary that you learn in elementary school or something, like this is what you do next and this is what you do next. And I verbally will walk myself through those things, usually when they're just tasks I cannot stand or I'm having a difficult time focusing on. It's like an effort to focus, for me at least. However, I do on occasion experience interactive echolalia. Now, this is usually kind of difficult for people to understand whether or not is interactive, and it's mostly if the person is there and capable of catching what I'm doing, if that makes sense. This usually happens in situations with like high emotion and difficulty for me to articulate, if that makes sense. I kind of, with my speech, it almost kind of regresses when I'm in a high emotive state or nearing a meltdown. It's very difficult for me. So, for example, there was a situation where someone had said the word okay, and it meant something very painful to me. Now, this would probably be better for you if I gave you the entire context. However, I don't feel comfortable sharing that with you, so I'm not going to. But at one point, I was in such distress that I kept on just saying, okay, 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 okay. And that's because I can't communicate to you the whole entire situation around okay, just that okay was very painful for me, and that it's bothering me. So like I can't explain to you like all the little things that happened to give you context to why I'm upset, but okay is what I'm repeating because that's what evoked the response for me. So I do on occasion, usually in high distress, experience interactive echolalia. And in that same sense, I also almost always experience delayed echolalia, words and phrases and things, especially if they like bothered me. They'll come up out of nowhere. They could be like from things years old. A lot of times, if they were said to me, I can repeat how they sounded and the kind of cadence that they had. This also, side note, the whole concept of echolalia also is why we might start picking up like the accent and the sounds of other people when we're around them a lot, maybe faster than someone else. Because again, everyone does echolalia in learning language. But it just can be kind of embarrassing when you start sounding exactly like someone because you're just kind of like repeating back. Some people get accused of sounding like they're on the TV or the like from the news or whatever, speaking like they're on the news, just because that's what they're using in their like vocabulary system and sounds. It's weird. In some cases, I have experienced immediate echolalia, but I think that most people have, and that's just in repeating what I just heard in an attempt to let my brain kind of catch up and make meaning to the sounds that I made or that you made technically and I'm repeating back. I think a lot of people have experienced this from time to time, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today. I hope that this was helpful in understanding what echolalia is. I still feel that echolalia is funner to say, so either way, let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you like autism content and you're interested in hearing more from me on the topic of autism, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel because I upload that kind of content every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Most of the time. Also, just a heads up, I do have a Patreon, so if you want to support me monetarily, get some perks in return, yeah, that word, go ahead and check it out. It is in my description and on the end screen. I hope that you're having a wonderful week, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!